You're not broken. You're uninitialized. Jung spent his entire career trying to tell modern men this, that without a threshold, without a deliberate crossing, you don't become a man. You just become a larger boy with better excuses. And here's the part that should shake you: every civilization before ours knew exactly how to fix this. The Spartans knew. The Lakota knew. The ancient Greeks knew. We just decided we were smarter than 10,000 years of human experience and threw it all away. By the end of this video, you'll know 5 specific ancient rituals, from Spartanagoge to Lakota vision quests to Stoic practice, that modern psychology has now confirmed work, exactly as the ancients said they would. Not metaphorically. Mechanistically. You'll understand the neuroscience behind why they work, and more importantly, what that means for you right now. Here's why this matters today specifically. You are probably living your life in a permanent adolescence, not because you're weak, but because the culture around you removed every structured threshold that was supposed to end it. No elder handed you a map. No ritual told your brain, the boy is dead, the man begins here. And without that signal, the brain defaults. It loops. It keeps running the same software it ran at 19. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. And the ancients had the fix 3,000 years before the neuroscientists did. Every ancient culture understood that transformation requires deliberate disorientation, and modern identity research confirms exactly why. Anthropologist Victor Turner spent decades studying initiation rites across cultures and identified a universal structure he called liminality, a threshold state where the initiate is physically removed from his community, stripped of his identity markers, and placed in a space between who he was and who he would become. Marcus Aurelius practiced a version of this inside Rome itself. He would retreat, not geographically, but psychologically, withdrawing from his role as emperor, from the scaffolding of his title, to examine his actual values without the noise of power telling him what they were. He writes in his Meditations, "Confine yourself to the present." That's not a productivity tip. That's a threshold ritual performed daily. Modern psychology calls this identity disruption theory. Dan McAdams' research at Northwestern shows the brain cannot construct a new self-narrative while it's still running the old one. The two compete. The ancient threshold ritual, removal, disorientation, return, forced a neurological gap that made the update possible. Contemporary studies on psychological discontinuity confirm that peak identity transformation requires exactly this kind of structured rupture. The ancients weren't being cruel. They were being precise. The vision quest, forced solitude in the wilderness, wasn't spiritual theater. It was surgery on the prefrontal cortex. The Lakota vision quest sends a young man out alone for 4 days. No food. No community. No role to perform. No one to be for. In that silence, something shifts. Kierkegaard, who wrote either or in deliberate isolation, argued that you cannot discover what you actually believe while surrounded by the noise of other people's expectations. He called it becoming a single individual. Not a role. Not a reputation. The actual you, underneath. Thoreau at Walden Pond wasn't running away from civilization. He was running toward himself. He writes, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. 4 days. Then return. Always a return." Stephen and Rachel Kaplan's attention restoration theory, published in 1995 and replicated extensively since, demonstrates that extended time in natural solitude restores prefrontal cortex function, the region responsible for self-directed values, long-term planning, and the ability to distinguish what you actually want from what you've been conditioned to want. Here's the brutal truth the research surfaces: you literally cannot know what you believe while you are performing beliefs for an audience. Solitude isn't a luxury. It's diagnostic equipment. Ancient initiations didn't change you. They killed who you were, so who you needed to become had room to exist. Spartan youth entering the Krypteia, the brutal 2-year survival test in the mountains, were told explicitly, the boy who enters does not come back. The man who comes back is not the same person. This wasn't propaganda. It was psychological architecture. Nietzsche's line, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," is endlessly misread as gym poster motivation. What he actually meant was specific, voluntary confrontation with dissolution creates the conditions for becoming. Viktor Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, arrived at the same conclusion through the worst possible laboratory. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That's not resilience. That's what comes out the other side of a death and rebirth sequence. Narrative identity theory, McAdams' peer-reviewed research shows the brain builds and updates identity through story structure. Specifically through what he calls redemption sequences, moments where something was genuinely lost and then transcended. The ancient death-rebirth ritual was not symbolic in a vague sense. It was forcing the brain to construct exactly this narrative architecture: a before, a death, and after. It was engineering the psychological spine of a man's life story at the moment when the brain was most plastic. Modern trauma-informed psychology is slowly rediscovering what the Spartans encoded into ritual. Ancient cultures didn't avoid pain during initiation. They engineered it with surgical precision and a specific endpoint. The Satirma tribe of the Amazon, bullet ant gloves. Gloves woven with ants whose sting is clinically rated the most painful insect sting on earth. You wear them for 10 minutes. And you don't scream, because the elders are watching how you hold yourself under it. This isn't masochism. It's a controlled demonstration of a man's relationship to suffering. Epictetus, a former slave who was literally tortured by his owner, wrote the same principle in philosophical language: make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. He wasn't writing theory. He was writing a survival manual from the inside of a living ordeal. The Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort, cold exposure, fasting, sleeping on the floor, was the Greek middle-class version of the same mechanism. Tedeschi and Calhoun's post-traumatic growth research, first published in 1996 and replicated in over 300 studies since, identifies the precise conditions under which adversity produces measurable psychological growth rather than damage. The critical variable, and this is what the ancients understood intuitively, is boundedness. The ordeal must have an endpoint. You must come out the other side. Ancient initiations always had a finish line, a threshold crossed, an elder waiting. That's not coincidence. That's engineering. Unbounded suffering breaks. Bounded, chosen, witnessed suffering builds. The ancients had this right. We just stopped using it. Every ancient rite of passage included transmission, and elders showing the younger man what survival actually looks like from the other side of it. The ancient Greek system of paideia, literally the raising in formation of a person, wasn't about information transfer. Socrates didn't hand Alcibiades a scroll. He walked with him, argued with him, refused to let him settle for easy answers, annoyed him into thinking for himself. Seneca's letters to Lucilius are the most explicit version of this pattern in Western history: a man in his 60s, dying, writing to a younger man he'll never see again, transmitting everything he'd learned about living and dying without flinching. He writes, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, associate with people who are likely to improve you." Not because the elder is smarter. Because the elder has already been where you're going, and survived it. Albert Bandura's social learning theory and the growing body of mentor effect research converge on a specific finding: a mentored man shows measurably lower cortisol levels, higher self-efficacy scores, and demonstrably better long-term decision-making compared to his unmentored equivalent. Here's the neuroscience: the brain is a social organ. Mirror neurons respond specifically to watching someone else survive what you fear. The elder's presence, physical, witnessed, embodied, literally reduces your amygdala's threat response. He wasn't just teaching skills. He was regulating your nervous system. The ancients built that function into the initiation structure. We replaced it with YouTube. 3 things to carry out of this video. First, transformation requires a threshold, a deliberate, structured break with who you were. The brain cannot update its self-narrative while the old one is still running. Second, solitude and voluntary suffering are not optional additions to a well-lived life. They are the mechanism by which identity is rebuilt. This is not philosophy, it is neuroscience with peer-reviewed citations. Third, you need an elder. Not an influencer, not a podcast, not an algorithm. Someone who has actually been through it and came back, and is willing to tell you what it cost. Every civilization before ours built these three things into the structure of becoming a man. We removed them. And then we wondered why so many men feel permanently adolescent, permanently unfinished, permanently waiting for something they can't name. If this resonated, subscribe. We drop one of these every Tuesday and Friday. No filler, no motivation porn, no hustle culture slogans. Just the ideas that have actually held up across 3,000 years of pressure testing. Hit the bell if you want to make sure you don't miss it. And if you know someone who's stuck, forward this to him. Sometimes the right idea at the right moment is the threshold.